Hello! It's great to be joined by so many of you for today's session with Unilever's very own CEO, Alan Jope. Today's session is sponsored by Unilever Future Leaders League, our annual marketing business case competition for young talent around the world. Alongside incredible keynote leader sessions like this one, our 78 finalists are competing for the chance to be crowned as our FLL 2021 champions. Whilst there can only be one winner, they've done so well to get this far and are officially the top 78 students out of the 54,000 applications we have received this year. My name is Sophie Haynes and I'll be your MC for today's session alongside my wonderful co-host, Jose.
Thank you so much, Sophie. Hello, everyone. I'm Jose Nava, and I'll join Sophie to host this keynote with Alan today. As Sophie has mentioned, this session is part of our Global Future Leaders League finals, and so our finalists are tuned in and ready to fire away their questions at Alan. Not only are we joined by our finalists today, we also have the honor of being joined by many of you in our LinkedIn community. So a huge warm welcome. You might have joined us yesterday for the keynote session with our Chief HR Officer, Lena Nair, sharing her thoughts on how to be purpose-led and future-fit. But if you weren't able to make it, definitely head over to the Unilever LinkedIn page after this session to access the recording. It's definitely worth watching. So Sophie, what can our audience look forward to in today's session?
Jose, today we are in for an absolute treat. We will be joined by none other than the CEO of Unilever, Alan Jope. Alan grew up in Scotland and is a big Glasgow Rangers and Chelsea football fan. Given the theme of football, we should be catching him in high spirits, as it's impossible right now for anyone in the UK to ignore the celebratory atmosphere of England having made it to the Europe finals. As far as CEOs go, he really is pretty cool. And when it's possible to, he enjoys exploring the world on motorbike adventures. Since joining Unilever as a graduate trainee, his 36-year career with Unilever has seen him through 6 countries across 3 continents, including North America and Asia. Today, Alan is going to be sharing his views on leadership in a changing world. And as Jose shared, we'll take time in the second part of the session to fire through as many questions as we can. So, without further ado, let's get this show on the road. Alan, a huge warm welcome to you. We are beyond excited to have you here with us today. Over to you, Alan. The floor is officially yours.
Well, hi, Sophie. Thank you very much. That was a generous introduction. I'm blushing with flattery. Hi, all Future Leaders League finalists. What a statistic. The final 78 of 54,000 applicants. Yes, I'm Scottish by birth, but I'm talking to you from our office here in London. And it may interest you that Sophie is an English girl currently working out of Vancouver. And Jose is a Filipino boy currently working out of The Hague in the Netherlands. And this is normal in Unilever to have a rich mix of nationalities working in different parts of the world, collaborating over space and time. And this is our second fully digital Future Leaders League. It's great to have you joining us from 26 additional countries around the world. And I can tell you, I have an interesting life, but this is the highlight of my week. I love the chance to engage with young people in our business and young people partnering with our business in the Future Leaders League. It's really the highlight of my week. I've been looking forward to it almost as much as I've been looking forward to the Copa America final and the Euros final on Sunday. We're live streaming this session through LinkedIn, so I need to also say hello to any friends who are joining us via LinkedIn. It's good to have our wider community here too. I heard that yesterday you heard from our Chief Human Resources Officer, Lena Nair. Lena shared her thoughts on how to be purpose-led and future-fit. That is our ambition for Unilever. We want Unilever to be a purpose-led company and a future-fit business. And we all aspire to be purpose-led and future-fit ourselves in the company. So now it's my turn to talk to you. I've been asked to talk about a fairly relevant subject, I think, which is the future of leadership. I am looking forward to the Q&A. It's always the more interesting bit. I won't talk for too long, and I hope we'll leave plenty of time for questions. You can access the Q&A through Slido, and I think you've already received the details on how to do that. Please send in lots of questions. The spicier, the better. So be direct, be edgy in your questions. Right, leadership. Well, here we are in mid-2021, and the last 18 months are certainly going to go down in history. Now, when I say that the last 18 months will go down in history, I'm sure that you thought I was referring to the dreadful COVID-19 pandemic that has swept across the world. And that certainly will be a historical landmark. But I believe the bigger thing that we're seeing right now is the impact of climate change. And Sophie's calling in from Vancouver, and so has personally experienced the heat wave in the Pacific Northwest, which is part of exactly the same phenomenon that has caused record low temperatures and rains across Europe in April and May. And I think this year is a landmark moment in our climate emergency. And I worry actually that COVID-19 will be a mere footnote in history compared to the scale and the impact of the climate emergency. And the world has problems. The crises are piling up on top of each other. Biological crises. COVID-19 will not be the last zoonotic disease. It will not be the last pandemic. We have an economic crisis where inequality is getting worse. So yes, the European and North American economies are bouncing back quite quickly from COVID, but those who could least afford to be hit by COVID are finding it harder and harder to make ends meet. We have a social justice crisis, which blew up last year in the Black Lives Matter movement, triggered by the dreadful murder of George Floyd. But we have social injustice across race, across ethnicity, across gender. Women's causes have been set back by COVID. Across sexual orientation, we see what's happening in parts of Eastern Europe. It's unacceptable. People with disabilities. So there's injustice in the social front as well. And of course, the big daddy of them all, I think, is the climate emergency. And they're all huge and they're all interconnected, which makes them even harder to deal with. Now, stabilizing our climate, bringing more fairness to our societies, reversing the loss of nature, these are huge challenges. They'll require a transformation that's going to make what happened with the Industrial Revolution look like a small step and that it happens slowly. We are going to need unheralded political will. We're going to need new models of capitalism, and we're going to need collaboration across borders and across sectors, government working with business, working with academia, working with NGOs, if we're to tackle these big problems. And the key, the scarcest ingredient in getting on and tackling these problems is leadership. Now, leadership is as old as humanity, and leadership itself has evolved as society has evolved. So originally, leadership was thought as something you were born with, born leaders who ruled because they were born into the right family or fought their way into power. Think of aristocrats and royalty, emperors, pharaohs, queens, kings. Their model was, I command, you obey. And they demanded that obedience without consultation or explanation. And there were terrible consequences for failing to follow their commands. Then over time, a belief emerged that leadership can be learned. And institutions emerged that were dedicated to teaching leadership, often in the military. So military colleges like Sandhurst or West Point, but still a very hierarchical, top-down, command-based model. And then what happened was, I think the trigger was the rise in democracy in the West and across the world. When people began to choose their leaders, it created a shift where leaders became accountable to the people who had elected them. And so we started to see more adaptive styles of leadership emerging, servant leadership, situational leadership, rooted in the idea of leaders serving those that they've been given the privilege of leading, rather than commanding the people that they've been given the privilege of leading. The idea of putting others' needs before your own needs as a tenet of leadership. And then the thought of using different leadership styles, each in the right measure, depending on the situation that you're in and the group that you're leading. So leading a group of military troops on a front line probably requires a different type of leadership from the consensual leadership that we'll need to tackle some of the big problems that I described earlier. So as we look to the future, we should be asking ourselves, what kind of leaders will businesses need? What kind of leaders will the world demand lead our businesses in the years ahead? And we should start with what's happening to business itself, because business is changing very quickly. Future success will not be determined by the narrow pursuit of profit maximization and chasing shareholder value. Future success will come from the ability of companies to serve multiple stakeholders simultaneously. And Unilever certainly believed for a long time in our responsibility to multiple stakeholders, responsibility to our employees, to our customers, to our consumers. We believe also in treating our business partners fairly, and of course doing the right thing for the societies where we do business, and for our shared home, the planet, and yes, for shareholders too. This is what we call, it's what the world calls a multi-stakeholder model. It is being seen as an increasingly viable model, as an alternative to simple profit maximization and shareholder primacy. But I want to underscore here, this should not involve trade-off. We should not accept that lower shareholder returns are a consequence of treating your employees properly, of doing the right thing for society, of taking care of the planet. Just the opposite, in fact. There's growing evidence in capital markets that businesses that are run on a sustainable platform, they're often called ESG, environmental, social, and governance measures. Businesses that score well on ESG criteria are outperforming the rest of their sector on shareholder return. So we should see a multi-stakeholder model as taking care of other stakeholders in a way that results in better financial performance of the business. This is what Unilever's employees expect. It is increasingly what our consumers are demanding, and it's certainly what the planet needs. And very soon, I hope that we'll start to see government and regulators legislating for a multi-stakeholder model where you have to take account of your impact on society and the planet. Now, leading this type of multi-stakeholder model in the future is going to require women and men who are able and excited to operate against the backdrop of two key criteria that are changing the world. The first is the clock speed of the world and the complexity of the world has gone up. The world's just changing more quickly and moving faster than ever before. But the second change is the understanding that business can be a force for good in the world. So the leaders of tomorrow are going to have to navigate a world of ever-growing complexity and of rapid change, dealing with accelerating advances in science and technology, the so-called fourth industrial revolution. I mean, the miracles of infotech and the miracles of biotech, believe it or not, we're still only in the foothills of seeing what those are going to do for our world and for business. So putting our business to the service of addressing growing inequality, addressing the degradation of nature, and addressing runaway climate change, that's going to require a next generation type of business leader. And we think about this a lot at Unilever. So we're able to draw on a long experience of growing, training, and nurturing leaders from all societies around the world. As you heard me say at the beginning, it's quite normal in Unilever to bump into an Indonesian or a Brazilian or an Indian. There is no dominant nationality in our company. And we've practiced and honed our leadership practices across multiple cultures. And we've developed a framework that we've been using for the last few years around what we call the inner game and the outer game. The inner game is how you are as a leader. Are you in control of yourself? And the outer game is what you need to do. Let me just explain what that means. So the leaders of the future will be guided and energized by a strong sense of purpose. They'll have a clear compass on their own values, and they will lead with humility. The leaders of the future will be their best selves through strong awareness, high emotional intelligence, openness to feedback, but also high levels of empathy for those around them. Empathetic leaders who listen, who sense the needs of their team. That is mastering your inner game. It's got nothing to do with running a P&L or how well you make a presentation or how well you communicate. But then there's the outer game that follows. And that is having a passion for high performance, inspiring teams, being a net donor of energy to deliver results, looking for new and better opportunities, frankly, not taking excuses. It's an outer game that involves taking personal responsibility, holding yourselves and others to account, and being externally orientated. It's very easy in companies to become obsessed with what's happening inside the company, and we need to keep reminding ourselves what matters is what's happening in the world with consumers, with customers, with societies. That's what we mean by the outer game, and there's a sequence to it. You have to master your inner game before expressing your outer game, and we believe this is a good leadership model for the future. So let me finish by talking about just 5 qualities that I believe it takes to be a leader in tomorrow's world. The first is purpose. You know, when you have an inner compass, a purpose which energizes, guides your actions and shapes your choices, it's a lot easier to lead from that position. A strong sense of purpose unlocks your energy, your passion. It clarifies what your contribution is going to be. In fact, Unilever believes in purpose so much that we've put all employees, we've made purpose workshops available to all employees. I think we've now put about 45,000 people through purpose workshops that helps them to understand what really matters to them as an individual and does it align with their work. And it has an incredible impact. We've discovered that people who have been through those workshops have got higher motivation, specifically 49% higher on how they express their motivation. They have a better relationship with their manager. They have a better job satisfaction, and they tend to score 5 times higher on well-being and show better resilience and recovery. So being clear on what really matters to you, what is your compass, what is your purpose, is step 1 of being a good leader. The second is to be curious. Curiosity really matters because the world is so complex and it's getting more complex. And as the world changes more and more quickly, the learn-it-alls will beat the know-it-alls every time. So learn about the world, learn about people who are different from you, go for that unexpected experience, talk to people that are not like you, step out of the shoes that you live in every day. And in a world where change is happening so rapidly, the most important skill is the learning skill, the ability to learn, unlearn, accept that what you learned yesterday may not be relevant again tomorrow, and relearn all the time. So in truth, I don't know if curiosity is a characteristic that you can teach people. I have a little bit of a suspicion that it's innate and that it's a difficult thing to learn. You know, I would say of my 3 kids, 2 are innately curious and 1 not so much. And they grew up in exactly the same environment. But if you're purposeful and you're curious, you're off to a good start. The third characteristic of great leaders is clarity. Clarity of thought, clarity of expression. The best leaders are able to make this complex world that we live in very simple and use that simplicity to provide clear and compelling direction for their teams. So, you know, I often hear, oh, so-and-so is a clear communicator. Well, so-and-so must be a clear thinker before she becomes a clear communicator. So that ability to simplify and make the complex understandable and turn it into direction, that's a key leadership characteristic. The fourth of my list of 5 is inclusivity. As I've said now 3 times, Unilever is committed to and understands the far superior strength of diverse teams. We've understood this for a long time. It's very simple, by the way. The aggregate skill you have in a team of identical individuals is only as tall as 1 individual. The aggregate competency you have in a team of 5 totally different individuals is as tall as those 5 individuals. It's about cognitive diversity. Now, we've worked very hard on gender diversity as a proxy for inclusion. We've got a lot of things we're proud of. Our non-executive directors, we have 9 non-executive directors, 5 women and 4 men. 51% of our 14,000 managers around the world are now women. That's up from 38% just not long ago. And so we're really starting to crack the code on being a gender inclusive business. We're now adding focus on inclusion for people with disabilities, for inclusion and being a great home for the LGBTQI+ community. And we continue to work on ensuring that we have good racial and ethnic diversity, and that Unilever is acting as a positive force for racial equity. That's a whole talk on its own right about what we're doing in that space. I think the great leaders of the future will be naturally inclusive, will have an intrinsic understanding of the value of diverse thought and diverse teams, and will know how to forge and pull together teams that are that carry a lot of diverse thought in them. So those are the first 4 criteria. The 5th aspect of leadership might surprise you. It's maybe the most important of all, and it is simply to be a kind and respectful person. The world is suffering from a deficit of empathy at the moment. I'm very worried about the polarization and the aggregate extremism that we see, where people have forgotten how to listen intelligently to other people's points of view and perspectives, especially to people who disagree with you. Without empathy and kindness, a leader will leave other people behind. I mean, yes, it's actually not that hard to be tough and gritty and determined for the business. Those are relatively easy characteristics to express, but it does not have to be at the cost of kindness, common decency, and respect for individuals. You know, the people who you will find yourself leading in your careers, they don't care what you know until that they know that you care about them. So there you have it. There's Alan's list of 5 criteria of leaders for the future. The world's changed a lot. So has the type of leadership that we need. And as we move towards a multi-stakeholder business model, we're going to need new styles of leadership. Styles of leadership that are more likely to be found in young people. Young people are more naturally purposeful, more naturally curious, more naturally clear thinking, inclusive, and kind. And so that's why I've been looking forward to this session this week so much. Nothing gives me more inspiration and hope for the future than engaging with young people. Frankly, I still think of myself as a bit of a kid. I have no idea what I want to do when I grow up. But I will wrap up there. Thanks for listening. Now let's get into some comments. Here's some of your questions. And I'd like to invite back Sophie and Jose, who are going to moderate the questions, and I'll also keep an eye on my iPad. Welcome back, guys.
Thank you very much, Alan. It is great to hear your thoughts on the future of leadership, especially as we're still navigating through last year's challenges. And I think we all can agree that we've seen how critical the role of leadership is during times of uncertainty. Now, the same as yesterday, we're seeing a lot of interest and energy coming through from our participants via the Slido Q&A. So please do keep your questions coming in. Sophie and I will be keeping an eye out for any new questions that might still pop up. So Alan, let me kick off with the first one, and this comes from one of our teams, Team Serbia. They would like to ask you, how would you explain what you do as a CEO to a child?
Hi, Team Serbia. I think it's a great question, and it plays to the characteristic I was advocating of, can you make the complicated simple? Because it is complicated being a CEO. But let me tell you how I think about it. Quite simply, about mission and purpose. So as a child, I would tell a child, my job is to make sure that we're clear what we're trying to do as a company. It's then about choosing what we put our people and money against to work on, that's resource allocation, and making sure that people behave properly. That's called culture. So if we're clear what we're trying to do, if we put our people and our money against that, and if we watch how people behave, then I think that's a good description of the job of a CEO. And you know, I put my particular emphasis on watching how people behave, because what you say is so much less noticed than what you do as a leader. And I saw a quote in a book recently where someone said, I can't hear what you're saying because your actions are deafening me. And I think that is a lovely way of reminding ourselves that it's what we do that counts, not what we say.
Love that so much. Thanks, Alan. I'm going to stick with another question about your role and being CEO. You said go spicy. This one made me smile quite a lot. Alan, how much do you feel like you're learning on the job? And a second part to that question, do you feel like your previous experiences and roles have really helped set you up for success?
I spent of my 35, 36 years in the company, probably half in marketing and half in general management. And all the skills that I learned in marketing are now completely obsolete. How marketing was done 15, 20 years ago is really almost irrelevant for today's age with digital channels and new ways, an explosion of media complexity. So there are some principles that remain true. The principles like it's very important to understand how a brand is positioned and be extremely consistent on that. So those principles haven't changed, but the skills that I learned over 15 or 20 years are completely obsolete. And I learn every single day, enormous amounts every day. I do use our platform called Degreed. I've recently done e-commerce training on Degreed. I've recently done digital marketing training on Degreed. I've recently refreshed my understanding of our company's ethics and code of business conduct standards on Degreed. So I make good use of our own learning platform. But by far the most learning I get is just by being curious about the world around me and chatting to people about their lived reality. So yes, it's a very privileged position actually for learning, because I get exposure and access to such interesting and diverse people around the world and from different parts of society. And actually that is a huge part of the stimulus of the job for me is that learning from other people all the time.
Very well said, Alan. It's nice to hear that we're not the only ones who are busy with following a few learning courses in Degreed, and that you do it as well.
Overwhelmed by the mandatory training programs in Unilever.
So keeping in the theme about questions regarding you and the role that you do, there is another question, and that people would like to know, are there any bits of your role as CEO that you absolutely dislike?
Yes, there are. I don't particularly enjoy firing people. It's unfortunately something that as you come up through the business world, letting people go is part of responsible management. Most often, it's good for the individual and good for the company, and people come to realize that. But I always dread the conversations that begin with, "Hey, this is going to be a difficult conversation," and by the end of it, you'll understand that you're leaving the company. I absolutely hate doing that. The other thing I don't like is anything that's repetitive and boring. So I am a new experiences junkie. I crave adventure. And so things that are a bit repetitive and boring, and actually delivering quarterly results and answering questions from analysts and the media that are generally, it's the exact same questions over and over and over again. I don't particularly enjoy doing that. And another thing I don't enjoy is actually travel. There is a wonderful side of travel, getting to see parts of the world and engaging with the Unilever teams around the world. But it comes at a cost of exhaustion. It's extremely tiring bouncing from time zone to time zone all the time. But the bigger cost is time that I miss with my wife and family. So I think if there are a few good things, not many good things. There are a few good things of COVID. One of which is I think I have a dinner with my wife every day for the last year and a half. And that's that's an unusual thing for the last couple of decades. And I don't intend to go back to the same frenetic pace of travel. I think we've learned how much you can get from virtual engagement. And I think I'll do fewer trips for longer to go deeper in places. So there you go, sacking people, routine tasks, and excessive travel.
Very fair indeed. Alan, I'm going to pivot slightly. You mentioned in your keynote session the need for collaboration and the role that businesses can play. In your opinion, what role should big companies like Unilever play when tackling societal, social issues in partnership, say, with governments?
Yeah, it's a really great question. Our model, we have a model of change. So almost everything that's important, we use a very similar model. So whether it's gender or climate change, we start with looking at our own house, and is our own house in order? So I shouldn't be out there, demanding things about gender equality unless we've got our act together and have achieved some level of gender parity inside Unilever. Then the next layer is we look at what we call our value chain. And what that basically means is all of our suppliers and all of our distributors and customers. So the immediate ecosystem that we engage with just beyond our own walls. And take that, are we gender balanced in our suppliers and in who our distributors employ? Then the third layer is what can we do with our brands? Remember, our most powerful effect on society is through our brands. And again, take the gender lens. We're so proud of the work that Dove has done, shattering unrealistic beauty norms and helping young girls with their self-esteem. That's a really powerful role that brand has played. And we've done one-on-one engagement with, I think now 60 million girls in a way that we've measured scientifically and with academics. We know it changes their self-esteem. That's a meaningful contribution. And then the final layer is advocacy. So going out and engaging with government and academia and NGOs and other influential bodies. So that's the model that we use. It starts with getting your own house in order and it ends with collaborating for change through advocacy. Now, it's a very interesting discussion area is to what extent should business step into social, environmental, political issues? It's naive to say you can't, you should avoid political issues as a company. It's stupid. Climate change is a political issue. Gender equality is a political issue. Of course, we have views, strong views on those. But as far as possible, businesses should engage on subjects that are relevant for them. So, if you're in the water utilities business, like Liv Garfield, who runs Severn Trent, one of the best utility companies in the UK, she's very passionate about water and climate change because it's directly relevant to her business. We are very passionate about nature loss, regenerative agriculture, because we buy a lot of agricultural materials. We're very concerned about climate change because it impacts our business. Climate change is not a tomorrow thing for Unilever. It's a today thing for Unilever. Our sales of ice cream in Q2 were lower than they would have been if we didn't have this crappy weather in Europe because of climate change. I'm very worried about what's going to happen with fires in the Pacific. We have lots of businesses in and around LA. I guarantee they're going to be disrupted by fires later this summer. So that's our model for change. Businesses should you can't avoid political issues, but you should focus on the political issues that are relevant for your business. And every single one of them involves outreach to government, academia, NGOs, other companies as well.
Very well said, Alan. Thanks for giving us a clear understanding of indeed how we go about tackling these societal issues. And maybe this one is within the same vein. Our next question asks that, of course, Unilever and its brands do not shy away from tackling big and sometimes divisive societal issues head on. How do we sort of go about that with consideration of cancel culture that exists right now?
Yeah, well, I'm certainly no expert on that, but I do get drawn into it a lot. And I think you have to accept that you cannot please all the people all the time, and you try to do what's right by your own moral compass and your own standards and what your company and your brand stand for. So let me perhaps illustrate with one example. This is a really delicate one, where one of Unilever's values is respect. We talk about respect as a value in our company, and inclusion sits within that. So we want to be a beacon for equity, diversity, and inclusion. And we've made it very, very clear that the LGBTQI plus community is not just welcomed in Unilever, we want to be representative and a welcoming home for everybody, regardless of gender identity, sexual orientation, and so on. And that's a universal global truth for Unilever. Now, it boggles my mind, but we still do business there are so many countries around the world where homosexuality is illegal or socially ostracized. It's astonishing to me, but it is the case. And in those circumstances, I think we should be careful on our advocacy. We should be strong advocates for the community in parts of the world where it's not illegal or socially not tolerated. But in markets where it is illegal, there's even markets where capital punishment still exists for being a member of the queer community. It's ridiculous. In those markets, I think we should be inwardly focused and create Unilever as an embassy where people in that community feel safe and welcomed. But it's not our job to be out on the barricades when it's against the law of the land. So there's an example of how we try to navigate that. And I was having to give a town hall meeting in a country, a Unilever business in a country where being gay is still illegal. And I made the point I've just made. And I went one step further, which was to say, if you find that difficult or unacceptable based on your values, then Unilever is probably not the right company for you to work for. And I was very worried. I thought I was going to get kind of stones chucked at me. But actually what we got was a round of applause because naturally we self-select people who share the values of our company.
Really appreciate the honesty there, Alan. Thank you so much. I'm going to switch gears a little bit. You know that we have some really enthusiastic young talents who are very inspiring and incredible joining us from our FLL finals. What advice do you have, Alan, for young people in particular who are at the very start of their careers and really trying to get started in the midst and in the wake of the pandemic that we've seen?
Yeah. First of all, let's think about the context. So my 36 years of working life has shot past. I literally cannot, I have cognitive dissonance when I hear someone say you've worked for 36 years. I feel like I was a management trainee just yesterday. I can remember the location, I can remember the people, but it's a long game. You know, it's 3 decades plus for me. The people in the Future Leaders League, you're going to much longer careers. You'll be working until you're 70 or 80 probably. Because of the projection on lifespans and improvements on health and healthcare. And so diversity of experience is an opportunity and a requirement. And here's what I would suggest. I give you the same exact advice that I would give people in our company. The first is do an extraordinarily good job in whatever assignment you're given. Don't worry too much about the future. If you do there's this strange paradox. If you do a brilliant job in whatever lousy assignment you've been given, it will open up opportunities that you could never imagine. Whereas if you spend all your time worrying about what's my next move, plotting your way up the greasy pole, people can smell it from 1,000 paces and it doesn't smell so good. So just do a brilliant job in the assignment that you've been given and you'll be surprised at what can open up. Second thing I would say is try the unconventional. I've been very lucky in my career. I've been presented with opportunities that other people have rejected and kind of I've gone for them. And by building up variety of experience and doing a decent job in unconventional roles, I think that is an amplifier of your capital. It just makes you a better person, a better leader, and more experienced. And the third piece of advice I've already given, which is be kind, be nice to other people. I mean, I'm not a very religious person, but I do believe in some kind of universal karma. And if you go around treating other people with disrespect, it will come back on you one way or another. And by the opposite is if you go around sowing kindness, somehow or other it comes back and rewards you. And I see that over and over and over again. our company tissue rejects bad people and accelerates the progress of nice, kind people. So if you do a good job, get diversity of experiences, and treat other people nicely, you can easily wake up one day in the awful situation you're CEO of Unilever.
Thank you very much, Alan. I definitely identify with your tip on kindness and respect. I do love this quote that says, being kind or kindness does not cost you anything. So always default for kindness. Okay, next one. Again, coming from our participants in the competition, the question reads, some people say you should work hard nonstop at a young age. What are your thoughts about this?
I'd completely disagree. You know, we don't want, in Unilever, we don't want unidimensional people. We want people who are singers and artists and adventurers and literature readers and poets and great athletes, and who go to the pub and have got a wide group of friends. We want rounded individuals in our company, and devoting yourself only to work at any point in your career is, I think, unhealthy. I think it diminishes you as a person. It will compromise your relationships with friends and family. Don't do it.
Very well said. Okay, Alan, last couple of questions, and we're going to try and squeeze them in. I'm going to switch gears again and bring it a little bit back towards you. One of our finalists would really like to know, what is one habit that you have cultivated that you would say has been pretty life-changing for you?
Gosh, many actually. So the two that spring to mind are travel. I've always spent a little bit too much money on traveling, more than I could afford. Now, to be honest, I can afford it, but we still spend quite a lot of money because your tastes get more expensive. But I've always indulged in travel, and I think it is such a great way of opening your mind to other cultures, other experiences. So I really have cultivated the habit of getting to other parts of the world. Wherever I have a study at home, there's always a big wall map with pins in each country that I've visited. That's true in our home in America, it's true in our home in Scotland, and it's true in our home in London. Talk about first world problems, having to put maps up in 3 different homes. But the habit of travel, and I think the other habit that is I force myself to do is sleep. I really try hard to get to bed at a reasonable hour, because I just find if I've had 7 hours sleep, I'm twice as effective as if I've had 5 hours sleep. And so that the habit of forcing myself to go to bed and turn off the light and get to sleep, that's really an important part of resilience and recovery, and you're definitely sharper when you have more sleep. So travel a lot and sleep a lot.
Seems like very easy tips for everyone. And now we're down to our last question. And I think this also connects to what you've earlier said about Unilever having diverse people of different hobbies and different interests. The question would like to know, what are some of the activities or hobbies that you do outside of work? How does the CEO of Unilever unwind?
Loads. I've got absolutely, this could be the longest answer yet. I've got so many things I love doing. I am a passionate sports person. So I played rugby at a decent standard when I was young. I played for my country at schoolboy level. I then couldn't maintain that, so I switched to soccer. Believe it or not, I still play football, not very well. I'm a pretty slow and dirty central defender. But I watch a lot of sport and a lot of football. And I did travel to Porto for the Champions League final to see Chelsea, my face mask, to see Chelsea win the Champions League. And I have managed to score a ticket to Wembley to watch the Italy-England Euros final. And I shouldn't really, we've got a board meeting coming up, so I should really be working on Sunday, but I'm not. I'm going to go to that. And then the other you already mentioned, Jose, which is I'm really disciplined on spending a couple of weeks a year doing adventure motorcycle riding in some far-flung parts of the world. Three pals and I, the four of us, we've been in all manner of places. We've been across the Sahara, around the Gobi Desert. We bought 4 identical bikes in Anchorage in Alaska, destination Sydney. So far, we've ridden them down through Alaska, Canada, US, Central America, South America to Patagonia. We shipped them to Cape Town to go up through Africa. We can't go there now because of COVID. So we're going to rent bikes in the southeastern United States and do some dirt bike riding in about 10 days time. I can't wait. And time with friends. You know, I take plenty of time in the pub with a pint of beer with my pals. And oftentimes we can combine time with friends with a drink with watching sport, and I'm at my happiest then. So, and of course, all the other things like reading. I love reading good books, including trash. Although my daughter, who's 26, and her boyfriend last night would not let me change the channel, and so I was forced to watch an episode of Love Island, and I truthfully felt like I needed to go for a shower afterwards. I felt very grubby from spending some time watching Love Island. I still don't quite get it. So there's some things that this CEO doesn't find easy to engage with in popular culture.
Alan, I think we have just got through a record number of questions, and also it's probably time for us to give you a brief moment to catch your breath. A huge, huge thank you to you for joining us today, for sharing your thoughts so openly on leadership, and also for tackling all of the questions. And I think for dropping in that last nugget at the end that the CEO of Unilever does watch Love Island. That's an exclusive, I think. This has been a really incredible session. And for now, it's time to bid farewell and to love and leave our LinkedIn audience. So Alan, are there any final words you'd like to share with our LinkedIn community before we jump back over to the FLL finals?
You know, Sophie, I'm sure they've heard quite enough from me. I suppose if there's just one message I'd like to underline, given that it's the broader group maybe listening in or watching on LinkedIn, please build your understanding of how business can be a force for good in the world, and how business can be part of tackling the big challenges that we face of climate change, loss of nature, and inequality. That's an exciting agenda for anyone, especially young people embarking on their career. Good luck. Thanks a lot for your attention. And maybe you'll want to participate in a future Leaders League in the future sometime. Cheers.
Thank you so much, Alan. And that's the perfect segue to remind our friends viewing on LinkedIn, this session does form part of our Unilever Future Leaders League finals. If you'd like to learn more about the competition and how the finals unfold, head over to the Unilever LinkedIn page. Make sure you're hitting the follow button so we can bring you all the latest updates. To our wonderful FLL finalists, a reminder to please stay connected in this session, as we will continue with our agenda for day 2 in just one moment. That does mean the time has come to officially bid farewell to our LinkedIn community. A huge thank you from us to you. Please stay safe, and we look forward to connecting with you again soon.